I didn't believe in any of this. I want to make that clear from the start, because what I'm about to tell you is going to make me sound like the kind of man who keeps a horseshoe over the front door and burns sage in the baby's room. I'm not. Never have been. I'm a structural engineer. I work with load calculations, safety margins, things that exist and can be measured. When Sarah got into the pregnancy groups on Instagram, birth energy, intentions for the baby, crystals in the nursery, I'd smile, nod along, and keep quiet. I learned early on in our marriage that this is the smartest way to stay happy. But it's too late for me to be smart about any of this now. Now I just need to tell you what happened. Grandma Rose showed up at the hospital on a Thursday afternoon. She wasn't invited. She wasn't expected. My dad sent a text at 2 in the afternoon saying, "Mom wants to meet the baby." And by 4 o'clock, she was there, in the maternity ward hallway, wearing a wool cardigan the color of moss that made no sense in the November heat, carrying a cloth bag with faded wildflower print. She's from a small town in rural Virginia, one of those places that's a half hour down an unmarked road from the nearest town with a stoplight. My dad left when he was 18 and never went back to live. Grandma Rose stayed. She always stayed. She walked into the room without knocking. She looked at Sarah in the bed, at the plastic bassinet beside it, at little Noah sleeping wrapped in his blue blanket, and she stood there in silence for a full 30 seconds. Just looked, with those deep-set eyes she has, the color of cold chamomile tea, that always seem to be looking at something slightly different from what you're seeing.
Beautiful. What's his name?
Noah, I said. She nodded, but didn't repeat the name. She didn't compliment him. Didn't ask how much he weighed, how long the labor was, whether everything had gone smoothly. She stood by the bassinet, watching Noah sleep, then turned to Sarah and said,
"You go ahead and rest.
Dear,
I need to have a quick word with Lucas."
Sarah looked at me. I gave a small shrug, the one that means I have no idea. Just go with it. She nodded and settled back into the pillow. She was so exhausted that anything meaning she could lie still somewhere warm was welcome. Grandma Rose walked me out to the hallway. She stopped by the window overlooking the parking lot and stood there a moment, looking down at the cars below, like she was searching for the right words somewhere specific.
The boy was born with a caul.
I didn't understand immediately. With a what?
A caul. The membrane. Still covering him.
I knew what it was. The amniotic sac that sometimes doesn't rupture during birth, so the baby is born inside it, covered in a thin, translucent film. It happens in less than 1% of births. The midwife had mentioned it with a smile, called a sign of good luck. I looked it up afterward, at 3 in the morning on my phone while Sarah slept. Rare. No medical implications. Folklore across multiple cultures links it to clairvoyance, protection, spiritual gifts. I closed the tab and gone to sleep. I know. The midwife told us.
She said it means good luck. That's not quite right.
She reached into the cloth bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Quadrille paper, the kind you can't find in stores anymore, with lines in faded blue. The handwriting was small and slanted to the right, the writing of someone who learned their penmanship in a time when neatness was not optional.
These are the rules for his first month at home, until the 40th day.
I looked at the paper without taking it. Rose.
You don't have to believe it. You just have to follow it.
She pressed the paper into my hand, picked up the empty bag, and walked away down the hallway without saying goodbye to Sarah. I stood by the window with the quadrille paper in my hand, watching her get smaller until she disappeared around the bend in the corridor. The paper stayed in my jacket pocket for the rest of that afternoon, through the last night in the hospital, through the drive home the next day with Noah in his car seat. I felt its weight the whole time. It wasn't actually heavy, it was just folded paper, but the weight was there all the same. The night we brought Noah home, I read the rules. I read them once alone, standing in the kitchen, while Sarah nursed in the bedroom with the door half open. I read slowly, The way you read the instructions for something complicated you can't afford to get wrong. Then I folded the paper, put it in my nightstand drawer, and went to bed. I didn't tell Sarah that night. It took me 3 days to tell her. When I did, she laughed. Not cruelly. Sarah's not like that. It was that low, tired laugh of someone whose chest is cracked from nursing and who's sleeping in 90-minute blocks and doesn't have the energy left for superstition. She asked to see it. Read it. Folded it back.
It's fine. Just old family stuff.
I agreed. Put the paper back in the drawer. And we tried to follow the rules. Rule number 1, no mirrors in the baby's room until he turns 40 days old. I took down the full-length mirror leaning against the nursery wall before I'd even set up the crib. Sarah didn't ask why. She'd read something herself about mirrors and newborns, some theory about early visual overstimulation that wasn't recommended. She assumed I'd read the same thing. I let her think that. Grandma Rose had written, in small letters below the rule, they get confused by reflections. They don't know it's themselves. They keep looking to the other side, waiting for an answer from someone who isn't there. And what comes first to answer isn't the reflection. I read that and filed it away in a mental compartment I kept alongside other information I didn't know what to do with. The kind that sits quietly without bothering you, until suddenly it bothers you very much. Rule number 1 was the easiest of all. We took the mirror down, put it in the hallway. The room felt smaller somehow, the way rooms do when they lose a surface that reflects light. But it stayed. Rule number 2, whoever goes into the baby's room after 3 in the morning cannot be the mother. Send the father. That one was harder to explain. I told Sarah I'd read. I invented a source. I'm still embarrassed about it. That a newborn sense of smell identifies the mother so strongly in the early days that nighttime visits from her could interfere with his learning to self-settle between sleep cycles. That it was important for the father to take the overnight shift to build early independence. Sarah gave me a look.
Where did you read that?
A parenting forum.
Which one?
I don't remember the name. She stood there evaluating me with that deep exhaustion in her eyes that postpartum installs in mothers like it means to stay. Then she sighed and said fine. She needed the sleep anyway. If I wanted to do the overnight shifts, she wasn't going to argue. And I did. For 3 weeks, I was the only one who went into Noah's room after 3 in the morning. Grandma Rose had written, 3 in the morning is when the call is thinnest. Babies born with a call wake at that hour in the early weeks because they feel it, feel the presence of what gets curious around newborns, around the smell of new life, around eyes that haven't yet learned to ignore certain things. The mother can't go because a mother's love draws too much attention. It's like switching on a light in a dark room. I read that 3 times. I didn't fully understand it, but I understood enough to feel a chill that wasn't from the air conditioning. On those overnight shifts, I'd go into the room without turning on the overhead light, just the soft glow of the little fish night light plugged into the low outlet. Noah was sometimes awake, eyes open, staring at the ceiling with that serious concentration newborns have, as if they're evaluating something adults decided to stop seeing a long time ago. Other times he was asleep and had only woken from the noise of my entry. I pick him up, rock him, put him back, go back to bed. I learned to move through that room in the dark without turning on any light. Learned which floorboard creaked, 2 steps past the door, near the chair, and how to go around it. Learned the weight of Noah at 3 in the morning, heavier than during the day because sleep loosens everything. Learned the shape of the crib in the half dark, the temperature of the room at 3 a.m. The way the night light cast long shadows on the wall that sometimes seemed to move and sometimes were just shadows. It was exhausting, but it was manageable. What was not manageable was the 12th day. That night, Noah didn't cry. I was already awake anyway. My body had learned to wake on its own at 3 in the morning, like a biological alarm with no off switch. I lay there waiting for the cry. It didn't come. After 10 minutes, I got up, walked to the nursery door, put my hand on the handle, and remembered rule number 3. Rule number 3, if the baby stops crying suddenly in the middle of the night, wait 5 minutes before going in. Grandma Rose had written below it, in slightly heavier handwriting than the rest of the page, as if she'd wanted this particular rule to be unmissable. It's not him that stopped. Something else in there distracted him. Going in fast means going in unseen. Waiting 5 minutes gives it time to leave. I stood with my hand on the door handle for 5 minutes. I counted on my phone. A minute feels short when you're waiting for your coffee to brew. It feels different when you're standing in a dark hallway, barefoot on the cold floor, listening to the complete silence on the other side of a door, gripping the handle like it might disappear if you let go. 50 seconds was always longer than I expected. 100 seconds felt like forever. 300 seconds in that position, with the cold metal in my palm and the silent hallway behind me, was the hardest thing I have ever done as an adult. I'll be honest, I didn't know what I was waiting to leave. When the count hit 0, I opened the door. Noah was asleep. Peaceful, breathing deeply, his face completely relaxed, the blue blanket rising and falling with an almost mechanical regularity. Nothing was wrong. The room was exactly as I'd left it hours before. The fishnight light, the white crib, the window with the blinds shut, the nursing chair in the corner with a muslin cloth folded over the arm. I stood in the doorway a moment longer, scanning the room without knowing what I was looking for. Nothing out of place. I went back to bed. I didn't sleep again that night. I stared at the ceiling until 5 in the morning, when Noah woke for real and his cry filled the house like water filling an empty glass. Rule number 4, don't cover the baby's face while he sleeps. Not with a cloth, not with the edge of his blanket. He needs to breathe the same air as the room. At first, I read it as a safety precaution. Nothing covering a newborn's face, risk of suffocation, things any pediatrician explains at the first visit. But Grandma Rose had written, the air in the room carries information. He needs to sense what's present. If you cover him, he goes blind to what moves around him. And what moves around him needs to know that he can sense it too. Blind. Not deaf. Not isolated. Blind. That word stayed with me for days. It came back while I was preparing bottles, while I was folding baby clothes on the couch, while I stood in the hallway at 3:40 in the morning, waiting for my heart to return to a normal rhythm after 5 minutes holding a door handle. I'd pull the blanket back from Noah's face every night, even when Sarah had tucked it up without thinking when she put him down during the day. She never noticed me undoing it, or she noticed and decided not to ask. That was the unspoken agreement that had settled between us in those weeks. A growing number of things we both knew existed and neither of us named. Rule number 5, do not photograph the baby sleeping in the first 2 weeks. That one was the strangest to explain to Sarah, because photographing a sleeping baby is practically a reflex for new parents. Phone raised, flash off, that silent click. One more photo that goes into the album you'll never organize but also never delete. I said I'd read about artificial light and retinal development in the early weeks. That closed eyelids don't fully block light stimulation. This time, Sarah didn't ask for the source. But I'd read what Grandma Rose had written. A photograph captures the moment. The captured moment stays preserved. What was present in that moment stays preserved with it. Not in the photo, but in the act. In the first 2 weeks, what gets curious near a call-born baby is still learning the limits of what it can and cannot do. It's testing. Don't photograph what you don't want to confirm was there. I kept my phone in my pocket. Sarah photographed Noah awake, smiling, making faces with his red post-feed cheeks. Never asleep, alone in the crib, in the first 2 weeks. Sometimes at night, after she'd fallen asleep, I'd look through those photos. Noah with his eyes open, that newborn gaze that seems to be evaluating something far beyond you. and I'd examine the background of each image: the wall, the blanket, the airspace above the crib, looking for something I couldn't name. I never found anything, which doesn't mean there was nothing there. Rule number 6: if he smiles before 45 days, don't smile back. Look down. Wait for the smile to pass. Grandma Rose had written, "The early smile isn't his. It's a response." He's showing what he saw, reflecting back what's there with him. If you smile back, you confirm it. Confirm that you also saw that the house has two who perceive. And then the interest doesn't fade. It grows. I read that rule the first night. Reread it on the third day. Reread it again in the second week, when Noah was 16 days old, and I was becoming more and more convinced that Grandma Rose's rules were not just old family stuff. Noah smiled on the 18th day. I was holding him in my lap, sitting in the living room chair, at 11 in the morning with the winter light coming through the window. He was quiet, looking at a point slightly above and to the right of my face. Not exactly at me, at something that was near me. And then the smile opened. Wide, asymmetrical the way small baby smiles are. His cheeks pushing his eyes half shut. I looked down, at the hardwood floor between my feet, at the edge of the beige rug, at my gray socks. I stayed that way until I felt Noah's small body relax in my lap, until the smile dissolved in that way babies' faces have of shifting state without transition, from one moment to the next, without warning. I looked up. Noah was asleep. I sat there looking at him for a long time, feeling the weight of something nameless. It wasn't exactly fear. It was something that comes before fear. The state you're in when you're not yet sure what you're seeing, but your body has already decided it's serious.
Is everything okay?
Fine. He just fell asleep. She came over, looked at Noah in my lap, and smiled that smile of hers, the one that starts at the left corner and crinkles her eyes. That smile I could receive. There's something that happens when you start keeping secrets from the person who sleeps beside you. It's not quite guilt. It's distance. A mile per secret, and you wake up one day looking at the person you love most in the world and realize she's much further away than she should be, even though she's 30 centimeters from you in the same bed. I could see it in Sarah's eyes. She didn't know what she was looking at, but she knew there was something I wasn't telling her. And she didn't ask, because the mother of a newborn has exactly zero energy left for chasing down her husband's secrets. Getting through the day is already enough. I should have told her. Should have turned to her one of those nights and said, "Look, there's a piece of paper in my nightstand. It came from my grandmother. I don't know if it's superstition or not, but I need you to follow it too. I need you to not go into the room after 3 in the morning. I need you to not smile back if he smiles first without you knowing why." I should have said it. I didn't. The break came on the 23rd day. I should have seen it coming. Should have understood that 3 weeks of broken sleep, of nursing every 2 hours, of a body that has just been through a birth and still doesn't recognize itself in the mirror, because the mirror was in the hallway, is more than any person can sustain. Sarah was at her limit. I knew. I could see in the way she looked at her coffee cup as if it were a promise the world wasn't keeping. I could see how she'd close her eyes for 2 seconds before getting up for another feeding. That closing that isn't rest, it's accumulation. I could see how she'd stopped telling me the small things about the day and had started looking at me with an expression I couldn't fully decode, but that had something to do with loneliness. I should have stayed up with her that night. That night, I went to bed early, at 9, because I needed to be awake for the 3 o'clock shift. Sarah stayed in the living room watching something, trying to stretch out the time awake long enough to tire herself out and get at least 2 hours of unbroken sleep. The thing mothers of newborns do. That impossible sleep calculation. Well, my phone vibrated silently at 2:50. I got up. The bed beside me was empty. I stopped. I stared with that look that takes a beat longer because the brain is reluctant to confirm what the eyes have already seen. Sarah's side had the blanket folded back, the pillow dented in the middle, the specific kind of emptiness that says the person was here, but it's been a while. I went to the living room. Empty, TV on standby, the orange light blinking in the dark. I went to the kitchen. The under cabinet light was on. The water glass she always left by the sink. But she wasn't there. I went to the hallway. Noah's door was ajar. I knew. Before I even opened it, I knew. The way you know when the phone rings at 4 in the morning. The body processes it before the mind does. The mind just lags behind in naming it. I pushed the door open slowly. The room was in near total darkness. Just a fishnight light, orange and low, casting long shadows across the hardwood floor. Sarah was standing in front of the crib, her back to me, completely still. She wasn't rocking him. She wasn't picking him up. She was standing with her hands slightly open at her sides, shoulders curved gently forward, head tilted down toward the crib. Sarah. She didn't answer. Sarah. Her shoulders didn't move. Her breathing didn't change rhythm. She was completely still, completely present in the room, and completely absent from me. That was when I heard Noah. It wasn't crying. It was that sound babies make sometimes, the kind that has no name in adult vocabulary, somewhere between a gurgle and a murmur, between a vowel and a sigh. A sound that seems almost like a reply, like one half of conversation, the other half of which is happening somewhere that isn't here. I took one step toward her, then another. The floor didn't creak. I learned exactly where to step after 3 weeks of overnight shifts. And then she turned her face. Not her whole body, just her face, over her right shoulder, toward me. Slowly, with that calm that isn't the calm of someone at ease. It's the calm of someone who has gone somewhere else and doesn't know they've left. She was smiling. It wasn't her smile. I know Sarah's smile after 8 years. The way it starts at the left corner. The way she almost always crinkles her eyes a little with it, as if the smile is too big to fit only in her mouth. This smile was in the right places on her face, but too wide. And her eyes didn't crinkle. Her eyes were open and looking at me, but looking from somewhere much further away than the room.
Do you see it? He wants to show you.
I stopped. The room was quiet except for Noah's murmur in the crib. That sound continuing, low and steady, like a conversation that didn't need adults to make sense. I needed to cross the room. Needed to reach Sarah, take her hand, turn on the overhead light, and fill everything with white and undo whatever was happening in that dark. Needed to pick Noah up and get out of there and close the door and call Grandma Rose and ask what you do when a rule has already been broken. I needed to cross the room, but my feet didn't move. Sarah's smile didn't fade. Noah kept talking to the dark, and I stood there in the doorway, hand still on the handle, understanding for the first time, with all the clarity that exhaustion and fear allow, that there are things the rules protect while you follow the rules, and that there is no instruction written on any piece of paper for what happens after you stop.